Giovanna is easy. You hear this character get compared a lot with characters like Cammy from Street Fighter, a very straightforward, fundamental style character that you can pick up and play in about 2 seconds and doesn't really have any depth, just you pick simple things with the character. But the truth is, she is a great example of no jokes, easy to pick up, hard to master. So the big question I'm going to answer in today's video is, why do people misunderstand Giovanna so much? And from both playing her myself and studying against her a lot so I could fight her effectively, I think I've identified 3 things that people tend to overlook about the character that are really important. But these things won't really be clear until we talk about what type of character Giovanna is in the first place. Giovanna is a fast, mid-range character with an emphasis on whip punishing. Unlike other fast characters in the game, she has a step dash. So this means rather than running, she actually takes a big step forward every time she dashes. It is a set distance, but you can cancel this on will a variety of ways, using both faultless defense and attacks and even the back button. She also relies primarily on strike throw by attacking you alone rather than using complex setups. This is pretty important and we'll revisit this point later. She also has a couple of things that reflect her speed through the system. This is pretty interesting to me because a lot of the criticism around this game comes from the game being very simplified, but one of the really important things about Guilty Gear in general is how the characters get expressed through the system. So for example, in the previous game, Guilty Gear Xrd, every character had a different wake up speed, both face down and face up. So when you did a combo, you would have to know which way they got knocked down, face up or face down, and have a different follow-up depending on whether or not you can cover their options in the first place. If you've never played Guilty Gear before, this might sound really complicated. If you are a Tekken player watching this, for example, you might be like, this is light work. It really just depends on what type of games you're from. So how does the game do this with Giovanna? The step dash is one where a standard character would kind of just run at you with varying speeds. This type of dash is not very common in the game, and she travels an incredible distance compared to other step dash characters. Her backdash is also unique compared to the other standard backdashes in the game. So where a standard backdash would get hit by round start white walled assault, for example, since Giovanna's backdash recovers 1 frame faster than other typical 5-frame invincible backdashes, she is able to recover and not get hit. She also has the fastest type of dash cancel too, so when you dash cancel normals, especially because she has more blocks on her close slash than other characters, you're able to recover from things before people can counterattack unless they use something incredibly fast. And this point kind of takes us to what is good about this character. So her speed is actually valuable in that since she's in the fastest group of characters, even when she's pretty far away from you, it makes it feel like you can't press buttons because she could instantly come up and whip punch you. In this example here, I have Nago doing 3 different recordings. 1, when he backdashes with 5 heavy. 2, when he backdashes with crouching S. And finally, him backdashing and doing nothing. Heavy buttons are incredibly difficult to use against her, and then slash buttons, while you can use them, since she's attacking you after you recover, it's incredibly hard to do something else while she's running in on you. This type of implied pressure is pretty scary to play against, and it's something she shares in common with characters like Chip and Milia. By the same extension, she's just kind of hard to get away from. Since she's fast, even when she whiffs buttons, you're still somewhat forced to engage on her terms unless you really pay attention to what she's doing. On top of that, she has active buttons that are really good at catching backdashes. Things like especially far slash. Her far slash used correctly could be a very hard to deal with tool. It's 3 hits, so it trivially hits backdashes. And on top of that, it's -4 on block, making it incredibly safe. In addition to having a good safe cancel option into 5H. She's also quite slippery, so this is another movement point, but in her case, it's not so much about raw movement speed. And while she can clear the screen pretty quickly, it's more about how quickly she can stop herself or continue to slide. This game's movement is a little bit more linear than the previous Guilty Gear games because of the air dash, where in the old Guilty Gear games, you don't really see the startup of the air dash, so it's about positioning yourself in a ways that you can deal with air dashes, where in this game, because the air dash has startup, it really makes people think they're better at anti-airing than they are. I know it sounds kind of harsh, but you do have startup on the air dash, so it's easier to see than in other games. That makes it so moves that stall you in the air and having low and far traveling jumps are really important. And Gio both has a really far dash jump combined with a potent anti-air option in her dive kick super. So she has great control over the ground, and she can traverse a lot of distance airborne to go over people's pokes. And her buttons really line up with these things as well. We did talk about far slash already, but there's also the preemptive poke of sweep used to protect her own space. 5H as an equally large, fast, disjointed with punish tool, and her main approaches dash 5k when she wants to instantly approach you and force pressure. She's also really good at combos. At this point in the game, basically all the characters with some small exceptions are pretty good at converting their hits in a meaningful way. Gio was always good at this from the beginning, but with the addition of Red Wild Assault and a new special move, she can convert hits that she would never dream of really cashing out on when the game came out. And you get access to these conversions early because you spend half your burst on it, which you have at the beginning of the round. So she's quite good at doing a lot of damage and building meter quickly. She also gets extra rewards for building meter. She gets a 5 and 10% damage buff and defense buff when she gets 50 and 100 meter. The 100 meter Q is pretty obvious because her skin color changes, but the 50 meter buff is less obvious. There's no real icon that lets you know this is happening either. The main Q you get for the 50 meter one is this little electricity around her when you cross the 50 meter threshold. This one is important for a couple of reasons. Typically we talk about positive bonus being really strong. You get damage and defense buff and passive meter gain, and your meter cooldown is removed as well. I believe it's not actually removed, but it's basically removed, so who cares, right? Small detail. So her having access to these buffs outside of positive is pretty big, but the other important buff she gets is chip damage on her normals. Funny enough, my Guilty Gear brain rot is so bad that when I was writing down notes for this video, I wrote chip with 2 P's, but let's ignore that for today. If you look at Nagoriyuki's health bar, you'll see his HP go down bit by bit as he blocks things. And of course, she does more chip damage when she has 100 meter. She also has one of the scariest situations to deal with for a character that doesn't have a meterless reversal. This is her enhanced spiral arrow. It is a highly advantageous guard crush. If you don't main this game, the really nasty thing about guard crush is that the typical protections granted to fighting game characters in 2D fighters are pretty much removed when you block these. So there's pretty much no crosser protection and there's no throw protection. And for a character whose focus is supposed to be around strike or throw, this is very scary. The only thing that makes it not too bad compared to some others like Potemkin's or Nago after White Wild Assault is the fact that she does not have a command grab yet. She also has a lot of moves with frame advantage. Her close slash notably being +3, which is not common in this game. I know 2 of the characters on the screen both have a +3 close slash, but the majority of the characters have +1 close slashes, with a couple of unique exceptions being Axel and Faust, who have -1 close slashes, and then outside of these two, characters like Slayer and Soul also have +3 close slashes. But again, it's not really common for characters to have close slashes that are not +1. But not only that, she has her raw spiral arrow, which also is advantageous. So the combination of having unique advantage on moves and fast attacks in general make it hard to process what can happen, and the moves you can see, you're like, she's plus, so you don't want to do anything. And finally, like a couple other strike throw characters in the game, once she gets access to 50 meter, outside of the buffs that she gets, if you want to spend that meter, she gets access to relatively simple, strong 50/50s. And she has a variety of ways that she could do these. These are nice because they just give you access to positive if you hit somebody, and like many other characters, she is much stronger in positive bonus. So now that we understand what's good about the character, what exactly are people missing? And in my opinion, it's her strike throw aspect in general. So when people look at a strike throw character, you're thinking of a character that, you have some small advantage and you condition the opponent and you sneak in throws. But this is Guilty Gear Strive, and there's a lot of shenanigans you could do with strike throws, even with characters who don't have command grabs. And Gio has a couple of secret, annoying things that people really overlook. But after hearing these next couple of points, when you watch competitive Gio players at a high level, some of the choices they make might make way more sense to you. So the thing is, she starts the round as a pretty standard fast strike throw character, running around with punishing you, doing her mids, and trying to throw you. So one thing is that she doesn't have to really do the strike throw pressure the way other characters do. Typically, strike throw characters build their offense off this type of structure. So first, they'll do delay, cancel, normals. This is the catching mashing. Once you start delaying options also to match their timing, they're going to say, oh, they're not mashing right away, so I could repeat the situation by doing something that's advantageous or maybe not advantageous depending on how confident they are, and repeat the situation. This would lose to an immediate mash, but since I'm delaying because they were delaying before, now I'm getting hit or trading. Now I'm uncertain on which way they're going to go about this because the offense is coming pretty quickly, right? So this is where they start sneaking in the throw because I lack confidence. This is a pretty simple breakdown of it because there's far more options that can go into the defensive side of it because both players are kind of participating in this push-pull type of game. This type of high-speed offense with a lot of options on both the attacking and defender side is pretty typical of Guilty Gear. But the thing is, Gio doesn't have to follow this structure. While she is able to replicate the examples I used before, where I'm going to get caught mashing here, so then I delay, which loses to them running back in, or trading, which means I'm going to get hit, which makes me uncertain, which means they start going for throw. This character is actually able to do strike throw from different ranges, and this is because of her dash being so fast. Whereas a slower character might actually have problems doing this type of tick throw of a 2k from far and then running over. I'm not saying this is super slow, but it's also not fast. The equivalent on Gio is very jarring because of how fast her dash is and how much she slides. So you have the option of doing a typical type of strike throw, or you can condition your opponent from a safe distance before choosing to dash up and throw them. And she has really good buttons for this type of offense, namely her sweep, which is very huge, and this actually had to be nerfed because on launch it was -3, which is really ridiculous for a move this huge. Her very good 5H, which lines up with Soul's 5H at -5. Her dashing kicks, which she could stop kind of where she wants and position herself as she wants to, and also her jabs to kind of just put you in the right position. In fact, this thing was so good that in season 1, the timing for the throw that I did, it would have thrown you. They nerfed her throw range to make this slightly weaker because of how powerful it was. With this thought about distance in mind, similarly to how when the opponent starts respecting these type of things, people start sneaking in throws more. You can also access these type of things from neutral because she's able to do them from so far, and you really commonly see Giovanna players do a simple selection that's fast and neutral, where they'll either dash 5k into throw right away, which does lose the throw if you're fast enough, but her 5k 6p has a 1 frame gap, so if you do 6p, you counter hit their throw. On top of her 5k being jump cancelable. So not only does she have this distance thing in a way that many characters do not, but she also does it from neutral all the time. So it could be very stressful to deal with, especially if your character is not really good at dealing with the situation. Or the outcome that can come from it, which is you getting thrown into a very advantageous guard crush. This distance makes it so that many characters can't simply use their fastest buttons to escape. If I was to use close session to throw, I would have to worry about them reversing the situation with a fast button, but in situations where I'm out here using 5H, the fast buttons won't reach. So even though she's disadvantaged, if someone were to swing right away, I'd be able to sneak in or keep myself safe using distance. Meaning you would have to both assess the spacing and what type of option you want to use. And if you're not good at using more passive defensive options like dash blocking, dash jumping, or purposely pushing her out to where she's not able to control the situation easily, on top of not handling this, then you will find Giovanna's pressure to be extremely overwhelming. So I tend to think this is usually the first point of deeper understanding that people have about both playing Gio and fighting Gio as they become more advanced in the game, but that's only one piece of the puzzle. Next, you have to look at her meter. Remember how I said before that she gets buffs from having 50 and 100 meter, and she gets like a damage buff and a defense buff, and also does chip damage? The first two, of course, are big. Doing more damage and taking less damage is a pretty big deal, and some players do a really good job of managing her meter for certain phases of the game for comebacks or to get an extra chance despite being incorrect. But the chip damage rarely gets discussed, and it's a huge deal. A big part of strike throw is usually what is worse to take, the strike or the throw. In a continuing tradition of me not doing good soul combos, here is Soul hitting me normally with close slash. It really sucks to get hit by Soul. This is one of the reasons why he's consistently rated as one of the strongest characters in the game, because his damage output is just so high when he actually hits you. Keep in mind that this is a powered up version of Geo with 10% higher defense, by the way. And the normal damage output would look something more like this. Compared to the damage you take off throw, or the admittedly nerfed wild throw. So in this situation, your goal against Soul is to, sound silly, not get hit. You can take a couple of throws, but then once he gets 50 meter, then he becomes extra scary because he can cash out the throw, he could do 50-50s, etc, etc. Geo's damage output is actually quite high, like I mentioned before, but choosing to simply block Geo and waiting to take the throw is equally bad. So when she hits you, she's going to do a big combo, and if you block, you take a bunch of chip damage. She essentially forces you to spend even more meter on defense, so you don't get chipped. The majority of players who play a character like this, especially once they get to an intermediate level in the game, will use the 50 meter to do something more like this, where they will simply try to throw you over and over until someone shows an escape for throw, usually jump, in which they'll try to react with a PRC. And while this is a good strategy, an equally or maybe even more rewarding option would be to sit on the meter and just pick strike over and over and over to do chip damage or drain meter. So Giovanna can enforce really uncomfortable strike throw situations at really unfavorable ranges for most characters, and can threaten an extra layer of damage because of her strikes doing chip damage. But there's still one last thing that people are kind of overlooking. But this one, when you watch competitive play, it's kind of in your face. I just don't really hear people talking about it too much. And it's the fact that meter enables powerful 50-50s, sometimes two with the character. As I mentioned with Soul, for example, it is reasonably common in this game when the strike throw characters get 50 meter, they're able to use that meter to do high-low mix-ups like other types of characters would do before they get me. So essentially, the biggest thing that people tend to misunderstand about Geo is how much she interacts with tension to get buffs that people don't pay attention to, because there's not really a Q until she gets 100 meter and she turns into Fiona from Shrek, helps her to enforce situations. Since she's easy to pick up, because she's fast and has a relatively simple basic combo and doesn't require learning some setup just to play or learning to manage some resource just to play, at least at a baseline. No real obvious mechanic to use in order to just play the character. People don't think about this, and she really rewards you for learning more about Guilty Gear in general and trying to apply resource against your opponent, which is a very key thing in the series, period. And this really opens up a lot of strategies and tactics, which I find very interesting. And I think the devs kind of picked up on this too, because a lot of people do rely on some of the strategies we talked about before around simply delaying buttons. After all, a very common complaint when the game came out was Geo had problems dealing with people using faultless defense to push her out, which after seeing this video should sound kind of silly because she operates really well from a distance away from the opponent. And I think this is the main reason why the developers gave her this enhanced spiral arrow move in the first place, because some of these more advanced ideas around strike throw are just kind of like nuanced and require more understanding of the system, so they did want to give her something that is immediate and easy to use. Think about the Millia player who just started picking her up. Okay, you die immediately when you get hit. It might be hard to use her mobility options, but when you hit 2K2D and press the dash button, you get a cross up. So I think this is kind of Giovanna's equivalent. And with this, it's still possible to recommend Giovanna for beginners, because when you talk about pressure and people saying that it's too limiting or too straightforward when they're starting the game, if beginners are complaining about a character that is supposed to be for beginners, you gotta do something to help them a little bit, right? But yeah, let me know what you guys think. I am always a really big fan of this character. I actually played her in the middle of season 1 when I was, this is about like 6 months after the game came out. I was really doubting Millia at that time, despite a couple of buffs that she got, and Geo was very helpful at that time, and I found her very fun. As usual, if you have any questions or comments, definitely feel free to leave them in the comment section below. For those who are interested in coaching, any fighting game coaching, or coaching specifically about this game in general, because this is what I put a lot of my time into, but I have my old notes from old games I used to play. I do have a Medify that I am, this how I'm letting you know I'm actually doing this thing. So head over to medify.gg, you can find me there if you're interested in that. I do stream most weekdays. The plan is Monday through Friday on Twitch. So if you want to hang out, watch me practice, talk about stuff, and see live reactions, because I do have a second YouTube channel where I post my reactions to other fighting game content and things that are going on that I find interesting. Like and subscribe if you guys feel like it, and I'll see y'all next time. Peace out.